All right. This is Bonnie Erbay, host of PBS's To the Contrary, a weekly women's news analysis show that deals with all issues affecting women, families, and communities of color. And joining me are Anushay Hossain, who writes her Anushay's Point, her blog, and appears on several of the cable networks as a news analyst, as well as Hadley Heath Manning, who is joining us from Denver. Anushay and I are both in the Washington, D.C. area, and Hadley Heath Manning is a fellow with the Independent Women's Forum. Did I get that right, Hadley?
I'm a policy analyst on staff, but we have a lot of wonderful fellows too.
Okay, all right. But we're going to talk about the results of Super Tuesday, and particularly the women's vote and how it will affect women. I have right up in front of me the New York Times delegate count for everything that happened on Super Tuesday, and according to this count, Donald Trump has 319 delegates out of 1,237, the magic number on the Republican side, that he needs, so roughly a quarter. Hillary Clinton has 577 versus Bernie Sanders 386. If you're running for the Democratic presidential nomination, you need 2,383 to win. So, and I forgot to mention, Cruz is not that far behind Trump when it comes to the delegate count. Again, Trump has 319 and Cruz has 226. So my point is, Cruz is closer in delegate in terms of the delegate count to Trump, I'm sorry, farther away than Bernie Sanders is from Hillary Clinton. Yes, and yet the takeout, if you watch all the news outlets after Super Tuesday, is that she's still in a big race with Bernie Sanders, and but Trump is the nominee already. Is this sexist? Anushay, first, tell me.
Is this sexist? I think that's a really great question. Yes, I think everything in relation to many of what Hillary Clinton has had to deal with in the course of her campaign has been sexist. And if you see, I mean, she kind of came out soaring last night, and it appears as though her and Trump have already decided they're running against each other. You know, everything kind of, like overnight has really kind of sharpened, and I just feel like after her big win last night, she just dominated it. She really came out and kind of built herself as the anti-Trump, if you will. You know, she stipulated love and kindness, and I thought she had the perfect response to Trump when she said that. When she made the point about how America was always great. It never stopped being great. We just need to make it whole again, and it was all about unity. I thought it was fantastic.
Hadley, your take.
Well, the Democratic race and the Republican race are very different for a lot of reasons. You know, one of the reasons I think news outlets are so ready and willing to declare Trump the winner is because he's in a pool of candidates. There were 5, and just within moments ago, Dr. Ben Carson announced that he's going to be leaving the race. So now there are 4 on the Republican side, whereas former Secretary Clinton is engaged in a head-to-head battle with Senator Sanders. And so that's why maybe some news outlets are treating it as if it's more of an ongoing conflict or contest rather than on the GOP side, where it seems like this fractured opposition to Mr. Trump. You know, there's no way for it to resolve itself unless some of the candidates like John Kasich or Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz consolidate that anti-Trump sentiment even on the GOP side.
Are you or is IWF supporting Trump or not picking a candidate? How do you do that?
We don't endorse any candidates on IWF, no.
Ah, okay, all right. So let's take it from here and analyze the vote that each front runner got. Back to you, Anushay, on Hillary Clinton. She got more young voters. She did not get, although Bernie Sanders still got more. She increased her percentage. She is winning the African American community, the Hispanic community, so far as we know. Yep. So what does she need to consolidate her win and move forward?
You know, when the conversation with the whole Steinem-Albright kind of controversy erupted a couple of weeks ago, it really seemed like Hillary Clinton's campaign was getting a kind of blowback, and young women started feeling like we're not entitled to vote for you just because you're a woman. But I thought what was great about Super Tuesday was that Hillary really came out winning. I mean, she scored big with almost all the major non-white voters. You keep going to say minority, non-white voter blocks, with the Latinos, with the blacks, with the Asians. So I think this is really important. I mean, these groups are just as coveted as the infamous millennial vote, which I still think Sanders has an edge over her. But you know, it's a long time until well, not that long, but we still have some time.
Well, and of course, one group that she did not win at all with was white male Democrats, and yet Donald Trump, Hadley, is doing great with white men in the Republican Party. Tell us what the Republican women are doing with Trump, please.
Well, we see a high percentage of all Republicans, about 40%, saying things like they will never support Donald Trump or he's their least favorite candidate. So he's been a very divisive figure on the right side of politics. That number is always slightly higher among women voters on the GOP. Slightly more women say that they're very turned off by Donald Trump, and that's no surprise given the sexist overtones of many of the comments that he's made on the campaign trail and previous to his candidacy. When it comes to the other candidates, you know, it's the same problem that the GOP faces with any voting bloc. It's divided. It's a fractured opposition to Donald Trump, and you have women supporting John Kasich, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio, but it's not enough for any one of those candidates to pose a real threat to Donald Trump, at least not today.
Okay, so what are Republican women going to do in the voting booth in the fall if it's Trump versus Clinton? Are they going to not show up?
That's a good question, and you may have seen that there's even a hashtag that's been trending among some conservative and GOP voters called Never Trump, hashtag Never Trump. There are some people who say, I simply will sit out from the November general election if my choices are between a Democrat with whom conservative voters don't share policy ideals, or Donald Trump, someone whose personality has been so off-putting, and frankly on the issues doesn't have a record, has never held public office, so there's not a lot of predictability in terms of what Mr. Trump will or will not do in terms of fulfilling some of those campaign promises that he's made. So there are certainly a large contingent of GOP voters who've been turned off by Mr. Trump. On the other hand, interesting trend is that Donald Trump has done better in these primary contests that are open primaries, that are open to independent and moderate voters, because he's really not that conservative on a few policy issues. He seems to have an interesting populist authoritarian ideology that he's bringing to this campaign, and so he is pulling some voters who maybe haven't been involved or engaged in the political process for some time, who don't see themselves necessarily as conservatives, but who are voting in the GOP primary because that's where Mr. Trump is.
But don't the GOP, hold on a second, Anushay, just for a second. The GOP is clearly, to me, divided into two camps, and the one camp is the evangelical voters, and the other camp is the financial GOP crowd. Don't you think that women, Republican women, might defect, especially those in high finance and well-to-do Republican women, which is a large percentage of Republican women? Don't you think they might switch over and vote for Hillary? The reason I asked that question is that I saw somewhere a quote from a woman, one such woman, business owner, saying, I just can't vote for Trump. I guess I'm going to have to hold my nose and vote for Hillary. Anushay, will we see lots of that in November?
You know, I thought it was really interesting what Hadley said, and I think we just might. I mean, it's anyone's guess. It would be so sad if women felt like they had to sit out of any election, considering how much women fought to even win the right to vote. But it's a really critical time for the Republican Party. I mean, their party has kind of been hijacked by someone who really isn't a Republican but an opportunist. And I'm very interested to hear more about the internal, you know, kind of struggle and conflicts that are happening right now within the Republican Party. And apparently they have some plan to like save their party from Donald Trump. So it's interesting because, yes, what will Republican women do come November if it's Clinton and Trump? But at the same time, what are they going to do if the future of their party is this man? I mean, they're equally as frightened. Everyone is scared.
Everybody, I've talked to a lot of people who are making plans to move out of the United States.
Apparently last night moving to Canada
president, and there's there's talk. Somebody I talked to recently was talking about moving to New Zealand, another one to Finland. Everybody's trying to find refuge. Everybody, in the progressive part of the thinking in the United States is wondering if they should. It's kind of like in the 1960s, and when men were being drafted, were they moving to Canada or were they going to Vietnam?
Yeah.
But anyway, Hadley, what do you think will happen? They are talking about a brokered convention or having a first round where he doesn't get 50% of the delegates, because even his support, I think total percent of the vote is under 40%, so he's not even getting 50% plus of the extreme right wing of the Republican Party that comes out to vote in primaries, and additionally the extreme left wing of the Democratic Party is the voting bloc that comes out to vote in primaries, whereas you get more moderates and independents during the general election. Do you see a way forward through a brokered convention or getting delegates to vote to switch votes after the first round of voting?
Well, a future or a path for how long, I think, is the question, because what Donald Trump has revealed is that there is essentially a civil war within the right side of politics in our country. I don't believe he caused it. I believe he's put a face and a name and a brand to a segment of the party, and also brought in, as I said, some outsiders to the party who identify with his message and with his tone and with what he represents. So he is really a political movement unto himself, not that he created, but that he has become the figurehead for. So even if Republicans could find some way to take the nomination away from Donald Trump by certain arguments using a brokered convention or what have you, there would still be that contingent of the electorate that would feel cheated, that would feel betrayed and underrepresented because they went to the polls to support Donald Trump. And so I don't know that that's really a path forward for the GOP in a sustainable way. But instead, you mentioned some other countries, and one of the things that distinguishes the United States and our political system from some of these other countries is that we do have a very binary two-party system. And I think what we're witnessing is one of the flaws with a binary two-party system, is that there's not a lot of room for disaffected voters who don't feel that the nominees of either major party represent them.
Where do you think the majority of Republican women voters will end up if it is Trump v. Clinton, as it appears to be?
Right. Well, that's a good question, and I hesitate to make a guess. Women in the GOP, just like women in the rest of the country, are not one voting bloc, but they vote on a variety of issues, and it depends largely on their life experience and whether or not they're married and their age. All these various demographic characteristics can be better predictors of how these women are going to vote than their sex, even in some cases. And so what we have on the GOP side is, I'm sure, a strong contingent of women who will say, as much as I dislike Donald Trump's personality and maybe I don't find him honest and trustworthy, I like that he projects strength, and I believe that ultimately a Donald Trump presidency is better than a presidency run by former Secretary Clinton. And so you will have women who vote for Donald Trump in the national election. There are women who've been voting for him in the primaries and in these, caucus contests. So it's not that he's without any female support. It's just that the female support is broken, and that there are enough women who are disaffected and put off by Donald Trump that, the question remains, what will those women do? Because, of course, rather than holding their nose and voting for Trump, I estimate that it's going to be more popular for those women to simply sit out than to vote for a candidate like Secretary Clinton, who doesn't really align with them on the policy issues.
All right, we will be tracking it as we come up. We'll be going to the conventions this summer, and we'll certainly be following what happens with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Both of them very interesting political characters in their own way. So I want to thank you, Hadley Heath Manning, for joining us for our Google Hangout, and I also want to thank Anushay Hossain, and have a great rest of the week, everybody.